In the apple boughs the coolness murmurs, and the grey leaves whisper asleep wanders. In this garden all the hot noon I await thy fluttering form.
Part of Ivor Gurney's song The Apple Orchard, the singer was, not inappropriately, the baritone Benjamin Appl with James Baillieu at the piano. And that comes from their brand new Alpha Classics album, Forbidden Fruit. I'm James Jolly and welcome to this Gramophone podcast. I met up recently by Zoom with singer and pianist Benjamin Appl in Switzerland and James Baillieu in the UK to learn about this programme, a beautifully curated and wide-ranging selection of songs on the theme of Adam and Eve, temptation, prohibition, good and evil.
Well, look, before we talk specifically about this programme, which is an amazing musical journey, let's talk about the whole process of putting together a thematic recital, because as far as I can see it, as recitalists, you've got, you can either sort of do the classics, you can do, an evening of Winterreise or Schöne Müllerin or one of the Wolf books, or you could put together various other things. Nowadays, do you feel there's a hunger or an appetite for audiences to have something a bit sort of more tight, something that's sort of more thematic?
Well, I think it's hard for our generation to find a personal language signature. Of course, the golden age of recording since the Second World War, particularly after the Second World War, had a lot of heights, and people like Fischer-Dieskau, particularly in the song world, and his generation tried to clean up a little bit the song recital itself and suddenly started to record entire Schubert edition, entire Schumann, Wolf and so on. And then the next step was to put programs together which really built groups of certain composers or certain poets and so on. And I always ask myself, for the generation I'm in and the one below, what is our musical handwriting in terms of recording and also programming in song recitals? And I think we also have to get closer to what people move, what people think, what's in their head, what are topics in their lives, and bring also this music on an emotional level. And I personally find concept albums or concept programs in song recitals very helpful to actually connect with people and to also somehow within a recording find our own way of expressing things, of putting different music next to each other, which then gives each piece a complete different context, where we start from and where we go to next. And I find that quite interesting, suddenly putting the mind of a listener into a different place than maybe they've used to think of.
James, you work with, a number of singers. Is there something, obviously, you and Ben have a very close musical partnership and work on these projects together. But when you're working with other singers, would you say that's the same with them, that people are moving away from, clumps of Schubert songs in one half and Schumann in the second or whatever?
Yeah, I think it depends on the singer and the type of singer. Certain singers I work with just want to present an evening showcasing their voice, which is a very valid option. But I think the song recital is really fertile ground for kind of the value-added concert experience, which I think a lot of people are hungry for these days. And I think, as Ben said, having lost, or not, the generation after the World War, when a lot of the German-speaking people had moved to other places, they knew all these poems, they knew all these songs, and that was a really rich and wonderful audience for song. We don't have that expertise so much in our generation. So I think putting an album together or a concert together like this is a way of just contextualizing music and helping people go through a journey, and, the way we perform it, or contextualizing and helping them through a theme. We just did a very interesting nocturne night songs program in America, and people react to songs in a very interesting way. And I think rather than bemoaning the fact that people don't know these poems or songs anymore, I think it's our generation's chance to bring the song recital into a different sphere and let people react to the songs in the way that they feel, and having a theme helps that.
And are you both avid collectors of exotica? Do you sort of hear a song and think, gosh, actually that would be really good in such a context? And do you have a little book? Ben, you're very organised. You probably have a spreadsheet.
Of course I do have a spreadsheet. Actually, I first collect them on papers, and in my office there are a lot of little papers. It looks a little bit messy in the drawer there, but that's my little treasury box. So every time I listen to a song or I see a score which I find interesting or a poem which I really connect to, I collect that. And then over years, there are thoughts how to bring them together and how to combine things. And then you have to sit for months there and just collect and connect and see, and then meet up and see which keys work with each other, not having the same tempo, speed of songs one after the other. So you have to find variety. And I love doing this work. Then get really addicted to it. And often I sit till 3, 4 in the morning in front of my computer, in front of the scores, and do that. So it's very tricky to get me to bed at this time of this process.
I mean, this is really quite an elaborate program. I mean, it's 40 items if one, follows the track listing. There are little introductions, so that brings it down a bit, but there's still a lot of songs. And it's not just a sort of sequence of songs, because you've broken it up within themes, which you give a little biblical line to introduce the various things, because there is a sort of Adam and Eve, Apple type theme running through it. Was there one particular place you started here, or did it just come together?
I thought generally quite often about the creation of the world, and growing up in Catholic Bavaria, of course, I was familiar with the Genesis story. And I thought a lot about it, but it somehow didn't really make sense to me. There were so many questions. I mean, why the hell did God test their love? It's a very conditional love and stuff like that. So I was thinking of the topic, and I thought there's so much playing around with boundaries, with stepping over the boundaries to try out, about feeling guilty and so on. It's just a very interesting emotional state we all very much connect to. And when I read again the story, I thought of certain songs, and then I collected more and more, and then I tried to group them. And of course, when you have different composers, it's not easy on one hand to have too many breaks of different periods in music history, but also in terms of languages and so on. So there's a challenge, of course, to put everything into a bowl, but then, of course, it also has to taste tasty, if I can speak in the language of Adam and Eve and the snake. So it really has to taste in a way, and it really has to connect. And that's the biggest challenge in the end. And that's what needs a lot of thinking, to connect an emotional state to a certain line of the Bible and fitting within this group.
I mean, James, you obviously as the pianist in this project, in a way, the style of the song is almost in your hands, because you generally, you start and you finish. Is putting songs together quite tricky? I mean, is it like a sort of jigsaw puzzle? Because there are various things, as Ben just said, you've got to take into account. You can't just plonk two songs next to each. Well, you can if you want to make some kind of statement, but actually to give a kind of flow, there has to be some kind of link.
In a funny way, it's kind of doing a bit of work that I guess composers must do in the way they pace big movements or big symphonies. And this is a program I think we're both very proud of. And we recorded it in August 2020, I think. So right after lockdown, when things were just trickling back to life, and then didn't perform it as a concert until this year. Ben has a residency at St. Martin's in the Field. And the first time you do it as a concert is also very interesting. And we were very close to it, so sort of understood it, but the audience really connected to it, which was fantastic. But yes, I mean, I think especially with thematic things, it's easy to get into one mood. And it's hard to find those little connections. So, I mean, I guess, yeah, I try and think like curating a wonderful evening or a wonderful food. You can't have all the big courses right next to each other. You need little things to break them up. And just to try and think like that from a musical style and a musical language and that kind of perspective is something we work quite a lot with.
One thing that's striking is yes, you have sung French songs, in previous, in Heimat program, for example, there were French songs. But I mean, here there seems to be a lot more. Listening to you sing them, I get the feeling that you're much, much more comfortable, enjoy singing French a lot more now. Is that fair?
No, it is absolutely. First of all, it's a French label, Alpha Classics. So it's nice also to appreciate the label and the people there. But yes, I always found French music very beautiful, and I connect on a very interesting level. I just am always frightened of singing it. But now more and more French opera is coming as well in the nearer future. So that's also a reason why more and more I spend time with French melodies and with French coaches. It's a beautiful language. It's very tricky, I find, but it's very rewarding on the other hand.
It brings out a slightly different colour in your voice than what we're maybe used to when you're singing in German or even perhaps in English.
No, I think it's also a different state of emotions, definitely singing French. It's often a little bit more reserved, a little bit more observing. It's a different way of speaking, of singing, emotional connection. And that I find quite interesting and challenging as a German, where strangely Germans in the Romantic period were quite emotional and tried to put that also in their voice or in their music. And it's just a different state. And that's something I feel more and more comfortable. It's not something which, of course, is natural to me, but maybe the mix between German and living in England, meeting somewhere in the middle is now quite good.
You know, we don't want to go laboriously through the programme. Talk me through some of the songs where you found them, if there are any stories behind them, or, you know, what you were trying to get across. I mean, you know, there are lovely groupings. I love, you're a little way into and you suddenly get Hugo Wolf's Ganymede, then Kurt Weill's Ucali, then Poulenc, L'Offrande, and then the gorgeous Rinaldo Hana, Chloris. And then you go back into traditional stuff with Das Rosenband of Richard Strauss. That gives an idea to people as to how widely you wander.
I think also being led by the thematic material, it was really fun to try all these things. For me, discoveries were the Eisler songs and also, you know, some Just the Gigolo and things like that. I'd obviously heard them before, but not had to put them down on record or perform them. I guess just trying to find as varied and interesting a program as possible.
I was just going to say, when I was listening to it, the song that, because I was listening and I wasn't looking at what I was listening to for certain parts of it, and the one I was completely foxed by was the Grieg song, To a Devil, which of course is sung in English, which sort of rather threw me off the scent a bit. But it's a great song. I mean, where did that come from? Or did that come from you, James?
No, but Ben found that one, and actually I think he even handwrote it himself or transcribed it, because we recorded it from a very interesting manuscript.
I think it's actually the only English song I'm aware of Edward Grieg wrote. Maybe there is a second one, but that was quite something peculiar. What I personally found quite interesting in this program, or what we tried, so there are two instrumental pieces, actually it's twice the same, which is a transcription of Faury's In Paradisum from his Requiem, which is played in the beginning and in the end. And what we wanted to create with it is that the listener is transported and put into the paradise with his music. We are really guided into the paradise. Then we experience an hour or so of music within the paradise. In the end, we are taken out of paradise because actually we didn't behave the way we should have. So that's generally the frame of the album. And then, of course, I find quite challenging, and maybe someone finds it daring as well, that we perform Gretchen am Spinnrade by Schubert, which is certainly one of the signature pieces of female singers, and I don't think there's another recording done by a male singer so far. And we combine it before with Heidenröslein by Schubert, which is always sung quite happy. Of course, it's a jolly melody, but generally I always find this song very, very dark, as it's really more or less about a rape. And we try to find a new way of interpretation and really mirroring this story. And coming back to a previous question of you, James, was what's a pianist's role in the post and preludes? And what was a wonderful idea of James was to really try out to cut off the Heidenröslein final chord and go straight into the first chord of Gretchen am Spinnrade, which is also something very unusual, shocking in a way, because even someone of the label thought we just missed the last chord. And the master of the recording was something wrong. So stuff like that I found quite interesting, and we were trying to explore on this album, and it's nice for an artist to be sometimes a little bit brave and outside of the box, even if some people might not like it.
You also finish with a number that's more associated with mezzos and contraltos, the Irrlicht, which it has its place in the Second Symphony of Mahler. I mean, that's a fantastic close and quite a statement. I bet that's quite powerful in concert.
Absolutely. So what we try also in the concert is that with the piano pieces, I'm walking on stage and I'm walking off. So actually, Irrlicht often might be sung from a different place, either backstage or within the audience and so on. So also to give the audience a different feeling ending this recital. So that's always a challenge, being far away from James, but we know each other so well. And he's always so perfectly with me in every second. So with him, it's possible doing such things.
Let's talk a bit about the recording, because I was really struck at how beautifully it was done. I mean, tell me where you did it.
Well, actually in Lugano at the radio there, which is an amazing studio, and we had a wonderful tonmeister and a really supportive atmosphere. And I think also, as I said in the beginning, it was just coming out of the first lockdown and to be able to create again and be together. And we had a wonderful time in Lugano, spending time together after everyone being apart. And I will definitely remember the process and the place just because of the special circumstances. And I guess that will come through in the way we made music together as well, I hope. But the place there in Lugano is fantastic, and the team too.
And also, I have to say, because it's such a beautiful part of the world and it was summer, it felt more like holidays. For the first time doing a recording where normally I stress out, it was just so relaxed. And also the team, the producer Valentina Benzi and the tonmeister Michael Rast, both of them just created the most wonderful atmosphere in this gorgeous studio, which is not so known actually. A lot of great artists record here, but it's kind of a secret place. Maybe not anymore now, but it's really wonderful to record here. It's fantastic.
And something, I talk when I do these podcasts is, we often end up talking about this, but post-pandemic, when we're going back into the concert halls and we're hearing music and, they may not be packed, but, there's a decent audience. Do you feel a different atmosphere? Do you feel people are listening in a different way, more attentively, with more kind of hunger?
Well, I think a lot has changed and many things stayed the same. So it's difficult to say. First of all, we just came back from America. I think, for example, America is still a few months behind Europe. People are still very frightened. People turn up mostly with masks or don't turn up at all. So that's a feeling which we had in Europe a few months ago. Some people, I think, are really happy and hungry for new things, for new programs, not for the same things as before. Some want to really rethink the entire industry. And others are quite careful and they just program more or less the classics and hope that that's the way bring people back. Other people, I think they are used not to go to concerts anymore. They're used to sit on the sofa every evening. That's a big issue we all face. I think not just classical music, but all kind of entertainment and churches and so on. That's something I think we are still in a process where we have to maybe work harder, or maybe that will solve it naturally. But there was a time when people were more quiet and there was less coughing because everyone was afraid to upset the neighbor. I have the feeling that's more or less all back to normal, like pre-pandemic, I have to say.
James, what's your experience? I mean, you've as we were saying, you've been performing with other people.
Yeah, and it's just curious how different countries have recovered in different ways. I've just been in Norway this week, the Bergen Festival. There the audiences were packed and everyone really excited. The weather was terrible. And then went to Barcelona too. And I think maybe the way Spain never really stopped cultural things and kept that alive, it meant the audience didn't get out of the habit of going to things. But I think the song recital is an interesting little microclimate within the classical music world, and I think that people are hungry for more probing and more interesting evenings, and I think, like we were speaking about earlier, the younger generation especially, and I feel like that's what we can do, as I still think of us as young artists, can try and take the song recital into a place that means something to our colleagues and our fellow music lovers.
So are you going to be performing the Forbidden Fruits programme now regularly after the album is out?
We hope so. So we have a few performances, but what I found interesting with this album is I think people also have to hear it on a recording. Promoters have to hear it on a recording. There is quite a lot of interest, but it's not something where it needs also brave promoters to just program it without knowing exactly how it works. So sometimes a recording, like in this case, helps as well then to get an idea of promoters that it's actually quite an interesting program. So it's a little bit like with Heimat a few years ago. Actually, I performed Heimat 3-4 more times, actually the 2 seasons after releasing than around the release. So that's also something certainly I expect with Forbidden Fruit.
Looking at the programme, I was thinking, well, if this was in concert, would I want to know what the programme was going to be? I mean, would I just like to go in, no piece of paper on my lap, no words, and just listen? Or would I like to know? It's a tricky one. I mean, I can sort of envisage sitting there and thinking, oh, what's coming next? I don't know the answer to that.
No, I agree. The only thing is we also try to actually present it in a completely different way, and we decided against it because, yes, on the other hand, it's wonderful to go from one to the next and be surprised, but I think it's also very important in this program to have more or less an idea what the song is about. So really that you connect actually this one quote from the Bible, particularly with songs where there's a certain background of these songs. And I think the text more or less is actually the connecting part, the thread going through the entire recital. And therefore I think in this case I'm even more happy than anywhere else that people actually know more or less what the song is about.
His paradise may keep his angels too. I only care for devils. When the devils are
Part of To a Devil by Edvard Grieg. It was performed by my guests this week, Benjamin Appl and James Baillieu, and it comes from their new album for Alpha Classics, Forbidden Fruit, just out. Voting for Gramophone's Orchestra of the Year is open, and 10 nominated ensembles feature some of the finest orchestral players on the planet. Head over to gramophone.co.uk/awards to see the nominees, and then you can follow the links to the special Apple Music playlists, and then you can vote. Gramophone podcasts are free, but if you enjoy them, then a really great way to support our work is to take out a subscription to Gramophone magazine. Over 13 issues a year, we bring you hundreds of reviews by our expert critics, as well as in-depth articles about the latest classical music releases and the most exciting musicians of the day. And if you head over to gramophone.co.uk/subscribe and enter the code podcast20 in the checkout, you can even get a 20% discount off any subscription package. We really value your support. And consider leaving a review or rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. And do look out for another Gramophone podcast very soon.